On last week's episode, I talked about why you sabotage your success and I exposed the reason why. It is because of Desperella. Desperella is your shadow inner villain, and she's an amalgamation of all your least evolved parts. And unless you get a wrangle on her, a hold on her, she is going to cock block you from making your dreams a reality. So if you haven't yet devoured that episode, it's number 116, in case you were wondering. Run, don't walk, and catch up, and then springboard yourself back into this episode, because today I'm going to be talking about how you break free from Desperella's clutches so you can raise your standards. Welcome to the Star Monroe Show, hosted by your fabulous host, myself, Star Monroe, psychotherapist, master life coach, and founder of The High Standards Woman. This podcast is for ambitious, driven women who demand more, who are ready to align with their higher self, embody their inherent worth, and magnetize everything they deeply and truly desire. So once you recognize Desperella in your life, because last week I was talking about we cannot change anything unless we see it. So it all starts with audacious awareness. And there are layers, much like an onion. I need to think of a better analogy, a much more glamorous analogy than an onion, or a Russian doll. So there are many layers to awareness. And just when you think you've got a grip and a handle on why you do the things you do, you're like, oh, there's another layer, and we go deeper and deeper. That's why I love this work that I'm here to do, to lead you into your high standards woman era, because you really do clear out all the clutter, all the debris, all the brainwashing that you've taken on board that stops you living in your inherent worth. And when you live in your inherent worth, you will always, I will guarantee you, get what you want. So once you recognize where Desperella is popping up in your life, and last week I talked a couple of areas where she pops up: settling in relationships, over giving at work, lowering your standards and becoming a sloppy version of yourself. And there's no shade. I've been here, and I call myself out on this on the daily, because we are, well, Desperella is a master manipulator of self, and she will gaslight us into settling because she is so scared of demanding more. But look, you're here, I'm here, and we're women who demand more. So we are navigating Desperella. She's no longer in charge of us. So the next step to break free from her grip and begin raising your standards is doing something about it, taking aligned action. Because Desperella keeps you stuck by making you believe that accepting good enough is safer than asking for what you truly want, deserve, desire. Insert the best word for you. The moment you raise your standards, the moment, so I love my standards. The moment you start raising your standards, you ask more from yourself, you demand more from yourself, and you start to reclaim your power, and you're stepping into a new role, the role of the high standards woman. And I'm not sure how long you've been with me. For the last year and a half, I've been talking about identity. You want to change your life, it all starts and ends with how you see yourself, how you talk about yourself, and how you feel about yourself. You look, we need to have a quick chat here, right? A chat below the chat that's going on. You cannot get anything to stick around in your life if you're always at war with yourself. So your job is to continue to clear out the debris, the brainwashing that pits you against yourself. And that's what I've seen. I've been working with women now for over 35 years. This is a long time. And women are at war with themselves. And I get it. You know, we live in a patriarchal society that has brainwashed us, but we're adults. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. You can't keep going, oh, we live in a patriarchal society, this. No, because you're giving away your power again. I get it that life isn't fair, and sometimes life is gloriously fair, and there's the paradox to life. And yet the only thing that you are in control of is yourself. So it all starts with choice. And I was talking last week about you are making deliberate choices to give away your power. So, and it takes the same amount of energy. So it takes the same amount of energy to give away your power than to claim back your power. So once you start recognizing Desperella's influence, you must choose to act differently. A good question that I ask myself is, what would my highest self do in these moments? What would, and I future cast my high standards woman version of me into 10 years time. And she is, and I always get the same vision. She's standing on a veranda. She's overlooking the sea. She's got her maid giving her tea. Her butler is there. The dogs are there. Afghan hounds, if you're wondering, and a couple of Shih Tzus, and a Bichon Frise. And she's laissez-faire. She's got it together. She looks back at me and she points her long finger, nails at me, and she says, you know what you need to do? You need to raise your standards. You need to demand more from yourself before you demand it more from the world, and stop moaning and griping. Come on, woman. You're made of constellations of stars. Come on, darling. Believe in your brilliance. So what would my higher self, what would my future casting version of my higher self, my higher standards woman say? What would she do in these moments? Well, she would demand what she knows is true to her. She knows she's worthy, and she would always set clear boundaries. Oh, excuse me, all of you that are prioritizing everybody else in your life, well, that doesn't work. You know that by now. You've got enough evidence to back that up. She always prioritizes herself. And when I was penning these transcripts for the podcast, I was writing about not out of selfishness, although I've talked about being selfish before, and I truly believe we do need to be selfish. We need to take really good care of ourselves first and foremostly, and then we can take better care of the people around us. We can't help people when we're depleted of energy, when we're exhausted, because you know what happens then. You get resentful, you become bitter, and that energy inside you is going to weave into your connective tissue. You know, you've got 32, 33 layers of connective tissue that wraps around your body, holding everything in, and it's stored in there, and your body becomes heavy, lethargic, and that ain't the way to move through life. So you need to prioritize yourself, and you need to butt up against the societal narrative around, oh, it's so selfish, or I can't be selfish, I need to think about everybody else. No, you need to think about yourself first. Then you can take better care of everybody else. And also, when you prioritize yourself, it's self-respect. It's holding yourself. You're on that pedestal. No one else is on that pedestal. You are on that pedestal. So let's talk about how you begin to break free from the clutches of Desperella and raise your standards. And also a side note that in the background at Star HQ over here, I am writing my next book, which is all about the journey from Desperella into the high standards woman, and putting together a brand new program which is called the High Standards Woman Finishing School, and where we will dive deeper into Desperella and deeper into the 9 core concepts that when you take on board and embody, you will become the high standards woman. All the details will be coming as we sashay out of 2024 and into 2025. So talking about how you break free and raise your standards. 1, set clear boundaries. I call it this red velvet rope lifestyle. Imagine you walking around the world with a red velvet rope around you, and you're in charge of that red velvet rope. No one gets to come through that rope without your consent. You are fiercely protecting your time and your energy. You're no longer looking for external validation. This is why I did a year-long and continue to do another year-long experiment in decentering men and centering my fine and fabulous self, because I realized I was seeking external validation from them. And all the time we seek external validation from something outside us. That is the clue of the external star. Yes, people may give it to us, but also when they don't give it to us, then we kind of doubt ourselves. No, you've got to recognize yourself. You've got to validate yourself. You've got to become a woman. This is what high standards woman always validates herself. So in this red velvet rope where you are highly respecting yourself, and this is a process as well, and life is a messy experiment. I love looking at life like a messy experiment, and you're not going to listen to this podcast and bam, everything's going to change. No, you've got to go out in life and experiment and find out what works, find out what doesn't, learn to talk to yourself with more compassion, stop having a go at yourself. Yeah, you can gear yourself up and say, come on, we can do more here, we can demand more here. And I always say demand more from yourself. And life is messy experiments where you're going out there, trying things, figuring out what works, figuring out what's not working, and refining and editing, and then going back out there and doing things differently. So back to clear boundaries. Boundaries are the strongest expression of your self-worth. And write that down, highlight it. Boundaries are your strongest expression of your self-worth. Desperella, again, if you're like going, who is Desperella? What are we talking about? Go back to last week's episode, number 116, and I'll tell you more about her. Desperella convinces you that by saying no will make you unlikable or selfish. Ooh, ever experienced that? And you've got to get used to also the paradox of respecting yourself and also people not liking this, and people's projecting their stuff out on you and saying you're selfish. You've got to be able to hold yourself. The high standards woman understands that her time, energy, and well-being are sacred. And she sets boundaries that protects her from overextending and keeps her aligned with her values. And I'm sniggering over here from overextending because I'm still constantly learning that. And last week I found myself, my son has come out to Turkey to visit me for a couple of weeks, and I found myself on Saturday absolutely exhausted. And then what happens as a consequence of me being exhausted, my inner critic, Desperella, starts to pipe up. She's like, oh, you haven't got enough time. You're not doing this. You should be doing this. But I know what happens to me. And last week I was talking about, you need to tune into your body and have a better body connection, because if you stay stuck in your stories, you're never going to get out of them. That's why talk therapy doesn't work. It gets you so far, but it's not going to get you to really heal and transmute what is getting in the way. So I noticed that Desperella was piping up a lot, and because of that, I then had this internal pressure on myself, and then my body starts to feel tense, I start to feel tired, and I said, do you know what? I'm going to rest. I'm going to take some time out, and there was a force inside me that said, you just need to be on your own. You need to be, just rest and score yourself away. And there was another voice that said, no, go out, because I've got a lot of family out here in Turkey at the moment on holiday. I said, go out with them. Go on the boat yesterday, and have a good time. I was like, and Desperella was like, no, you can't have a good time. There's so much to do. And I was like, backwards and forwards. And I just stood, because I always say that, use this quote by Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response is a space. You want to reside in the space. And so I stood in the middle of my house and I just went, what do I need to do? And I was like, darling, you know what you need to do. You need to go out and have some fun. You're taking everything too seriously. So I went out on the boat and had a great time, and the pressure released. So I'm ongoing. So what I want you to know is that someone who is neck deep in this work, like, this is my work, this is my methodology, and I'm here to transmute my methodology into ways that you can take it on board and start to embody it into your life so you can become a high standards woman who always gets what she wants. Is I want you to know that it's a process. It's not about perfection over here. We can always refine, and yet it's always this understanding that it's a process. We're always learning. So yeah, that's why I sniggered about the overextending. So how else can you break free and raise your standards? Stop overgiving. Desperella tells you that your worth is tied to how much you give. I could probably do a cross-section of all my private clientele, and I would say, no, 10 out of 10 of them have this trait. 10 out of 10. It's a trait that has been instilled in women, that we have to be the nurturers, the caregivers, we have to fix, we have to resolve, we have to save. I don't know where we got that narrative that men are the protectors and the providers. I don't know where that came from. Women are the protectors and the providers. It's been instilled in us as nurturers, caregivers. And yet, if you're always looking after everybody else, guess who you're not looking after? You. So it's about challenging this narrative that tells you that your worth is tied to how much you give. The flip side, so I'm showing you two sides together, is Desperella is one side, and the high standards woman knows that her worth, her value comes from within. It comes from how she takes good care of herself. And I'm not just talking bubble baths and eating chocolate on the sofa. I'm talking about how you rest, how you set boundaries, how you talk to yourself, how's your sleep hygiene, are you moving every single day? Are you eating good foods? Are you hanging around with people that are lighting you up? Are you doing more of what lights you up and less of what drains you? That's what I'm talking about, self-care. Is your money affairs in order? Are you being responsible and mature around your health, your wellness, your relationships? That's self-care. So, and also, I just started listening to the Course of Miracles, and Marianne Williamson is very famous for teaching that. It's not her work, it's by an unknown author. And and I'm like, oh, of course I'm listening to it now on this part of my journey. Of course I'm understanding, because our true place, our true selves are abundant, are limitless, are possibilities. And it's the brainwashing was taken on board that scarcity thinking, fear, there's not enough. It's all brainwashing. And as I said before, and I will keep saying, you have got to clear out the clutter. You've got to clear out the debris. And so Desperella is the whole embodiment of scarcity thinking, of fear-based thinking. And it keeps you stuck. And this is why it's very, very important, if you're on this journey, of course you're on this journey, you're listening to me, that you hang around with women that, one, you resonate with. You've got to resonate with the woman. And two, what is number two? Laughing at myself. Well, you've got to hang around with, that's it. You've got to hang around with people that you resonate, and two, are living lives that symbolize this, that you're like, oh yes, they're living a high standards woman life. God, I crack myself up. So yes, a high standards woman comes from a place, she gives from a place of abundance, not desperation. Choose to give because you want to, not because you feel obligated to. So these are, and I know these are entry level ways that you can start to break free from Desperella. And so the third way that we're going to talk about today is demand more. Full stop. Period. Demand more. Desperella convinces you to settle for crumbs, and she calls it the cake. She calls it the cake. She makes you believe that asking for more will make you seem difficult and demanding. Paradox, you may seem difficult and demanding to some people. And yet what I am learning as I have come out of the clutches of Desperella and am creating a life aligned with my higher self, my high standards woman, is that the people that live this way, the people that think this way, will never look at you as being difficult or demanding, ever. And that has always been one of my little Desperella traits, is I can't ask for this because people won't like me. People will think I'm selfish. People will think this. And again, this is all about extracting yourself away from what people think and focusing on what you think. And a lot of this is you're not even thinking what you think because you're listening to everybody else. More on that. I think it's on next week's podcast. So Desperella convinces you to settle for crumbs, calls it the cake. She makes you believe that asking for more will make you seem difficult or demanding, but the high standards woman knows that she deserves nothing less than what aligns with her higher self. She knows abundance is her birthright. There is so much here on this planet Earth, so much here. She knows there is more than enough. And she demands more. Demand the best for yourself in your career, relationships, and personal life. Because, darling, if you don't demand the best for you in your career, relationships, and personal life, then who else is? And I tell you now, no one. No one. I want to get to the end of my life, however that is. I could fall off the end of a cliff. I could be hit by a bus. Especially out here in Turkey, they drive like maniacs. I could die peacefully in my sleep, or I could have a ravaged disease. Who knows how I'm going to go out? And yet, I want to go out knowing I've done my absolute best in this life. I want to go out knowing I squeezed the memories out of this life. And if you don't want that for yourself, then you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. Each time you raise your standards, you weaken Desperella's death grip on you. Every time you choose to set a boundary, every time you say no to what doesn't serve you, or to raise the bar, you're telling Desperella that she no longer runs the show. We don't kick Desperella to the curb. We take good care of Desperella in all of this as well. And yet she does all of this because she's scared. She lives from a place of fear and scarcity. So it's you taking different actions that are showing her that, oh, we're not dying when we do this. And also you're reassuring her as well. You're like, look, we can live this way. This is for us. This is how we're going to do it. And you don't need to run the show anymore. And as you do this, like I said, it's an ongoing, messy process. You're reclaiming your power as the high standards woman, a woman who is embodied in her inherent worth. Give you a little actionable assignment this week. So as you reflect on the areas of your life where you've been settling, ask yourself, what would my higher self do? What would my future casting version of my high standards woman do here? And begin to make small shifts, whether it's setting a boundary, declining a task that doesn't serve you, or asking for more in your relationships. There's a way to do that as well. And we use siren energy for that. The art of playful negotiation. The more you act from a place of worth, which is your inherent birthright, the more you will see your life rise to meet your new standards. Can we have that on I don't do t-shirts or sweatshirts. I need some beautiful clothing where we could do these logos. I haven't figured out how we're going to do that, but we will. Enrollment for the High Standards Women's Society. Haven't talked about that either. This is my membership. It's currently closed at the moment and it reopens for the next cohort early 2025. This is where women step into their higher selves and surround themselves with high caliber peers. You want to be, as I said, I want to be hanging around women that are making their dreams come true and transform their lives. So stick with me. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and you will hear me sharing more about this as we come towards the end of this year. And before you go, thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for your willingness to be a woman who is embodied in her worth. Join me each week for transformational conversations, insights, and strategies to help you rise up into your brilliance, embrace unapologetic confidence, and live that life of brilliance. It's time to become the woman who always gets what she wants.